So welcome to everyone joining. Thank you for spending your afternoon, an hour of your afternoon with us. We are a collection of folks dedicated to the question of embodied carbon. And in this case, the Boston hub of the Carbon Leadership Forum, hosted by and part of the BSA as a knowledge community. Rochelle, Ain, and myself are co-chairs for the year or two, and have been having a lot of fun with everyone, working on a number of different working groups. The education series is the home of the efforts today. There are a number of resources and tools that we've been collecting. A lot of the members of the hub are authors of these tools, and we're working to get these posted on the BSA website as well, so that they're easy to reference moving forward. The education working group has been embarking on as much as we can to spread the word and help infuse the embodied carbon knowledge into the industry. We started with a call to action in 2019. Last year, Embodied Carbon 101 series for 12 sessions. And this year, this is the second of 7 forum-based sessions, so meant to be as engaging as possible with everyone who's attending, to really try to understand what the specific benefits and challenges and opportunities are of looking at embodied carbon in a specific sector. So today we're talking about landscape, including civil and infrastructure as best possible. And then following this series, we're hoping to understand what the key items are that everyone will benefit the most from in terms of identifying deep dive and detailed discussions moving forward. June somehow turns out to be Embodied Carbon Month. We've got a lot going on, both with this Impact series, as well as other events. On Friday this week, there's a municipal summit being hosted by BE Plus and a number of other organizations, and that is free for city staff and leadership. So if you have municipality folks that you think should know more about zero carbon, both operational and embodied, please send them the information to join. Metropolis, Architectural Record are having events, and plenty others that we didn't note. In addition to the CLF Boston Hub, typically every other month, because June is so busy, we've shifted the June date to July, and all of the signups for these are located on the BSA website. This is not the wrap up yet, apologies. I'm gonna hand it over to our panelists and instigators today. Please do keep yourself muted if you're not talking. Share video if you like. Chat is optional, but getting your thoughts, questions, comments, concerns in the chat would be excellent as we go. And there is a CEU comment in the chat as well for your reference. I'll leave it to the instigators to help explain how much they'd like to get your participation and how. John, over to you.
Tremendous. Thank you, Julie. Really appreciate it. Hello, everyone. My name is John McMeeking. I'm a landscape architect with SMRT Architects and Engineers. We're in Andover, Massachusetts, Portland, Maine, and Schenectady, New York. I want to thank all of you for being here this afternoon for this important discussion. Also, just want to give a few thank yous to the BSA for organizing this whole discussion series. And a special shout out to Lisa Carey Moore for guiding us along the way. She's been facilitating, not just helping me and Rachel and Pamela get organized, but all of these discussion series over the next week or so. So thank you to all of you guys for all your help. Really appreciate it. I want to say thank you to Pamela Conrad from CMG Landscape Architecture in San Francisco, and Rachel Loeffler from the Berkshire Design Group in Northampton for joining me to discuss this really important topic of carbon in the landscape. So just a couple of quick housekeeping things as far as how we're going to kind of run things here for the next 45 minutes. The intent is really for this to be an open discussion. So please use the chat function, raise your hand button to participate. There's not a ton of us here this afternoon, but it's a nice number that we can hopefully engage with each other and make some progress. So as we only do have an hour or 45 minutes, we kind of felt that it was sort of a good idea to focus really on 4 topics and really just treat this as sort of an open discussion. We want to talk about inspiration, why, when, how did you get involved in the embodied carbon world? What are you doing to track and calculate carbon? or are you doing this? What are some of the challenges you're facing or seeing? And then implementation, right? Like, what are you doing? How are you doing it? And ultimately, what are the next steps that we can take to start making a bigger difference than we already are? I would just say, I think it's fair to say that the discussions surrounding embodied carbon have pretty much been, that you hear at least, are pretty much being discussed regarding vertical construction. But it's obvious to all of us here the importance of addressing it in the world of site design. So I know for me, sustainability has sort of always been a part of my life, but I mean, with respect to recycling and caring for the landscape and caring for trees, but honestly, before I started seeing some of the statistics and the metrics and the data that came out really as part of the AIA 2030 commitment, I really had no idea. And, it was almost like scared me into trying to make a difference as quickly as I could. I mean, I got a couple of them here that for me were crazy. 40% of global CO2 emissions is directly from the building and construction industry. The cement industry alone accounts for more than 5% of total annual CO2 emissions in the world. And over the next 30 years, upfront carbon will roughly equal operational carbon. So our industry has to be a part of the solution. I know we're trying, we're making good strides, but I think you guys would all agree that we can do more and we need to do more. So what I'm doing, what we're doing at SMRT, our Sustainability Council, set up a specific work group that is entirely focused around reducing embodied carbon. So what are the strategies that we're trying to do to reduce embodied carbon? There's discipline specific things that we can do because we're a multidisciplinary AE firm. So for example, we're talking about site. So what we're doing is we're modifying our specifications for concrete. We're requiring 30% ground furnace blast slag. We're increasing planting requirements by 15%. We're promoting green stormwater over gray stormwater. Those kind of discipline specific things that we can do that are easy, tangible, sort of low hanging fruit, if you will. And then we're also trying to develop discipline specific carbon reduction strategies and workflows. So that's where it gets a little bit more challenging, is to really get that holistic workflow for all the disciplines to reduce the carbon on your project. So for me, it's exciting, to be here at this time when we can make a difference, but it's also, in a way, it's a kind of a call for our arms. I mean, we've got to do more, and we've got to do more as soon as we can. So Rachel, I don't know, if you want to comment on some of the inspiration that you have around trying to reduce carbon on your projects, and sort of when and how you get involved in trying to make a difference in this capacity.
Yeah, I think I first started to really panic when I went to a lecture and I heard about how 1 degree Celsius change in the oceans would lead to acidification and a chain of events that could affect every population, human and every living creature on Earth, and realizing how we were headed towards the precipice. Back in 2007, 2005, I was with Hargreaves Associates, and we were working on the Nashville Riverfront project and working with Titan Stadium and a bunch of different agencies. And one thing that we were looking at was game day consumption of gasoline and carbon emissions. And if we could plant enough trees at the stadium site to offset the carbon. And it was a small little calculation that was based upon what was available online. It was a little defeating, and we didn't bring that forward to the discussion with the client as a failed experiment. And then, since then, Pamela, who's going to speak in a moment, her work and others' work has really helped give us tools to think about things more concretely and with to be able to quantify things. And also to look at a variety of scales, land pattern scales and time scales to make more informed decisions. And so reflecting on that that experience, I kind of want to go back now and look at the 400-acre park that we were working on and see how much carbon we were sequestering overall, and what would happen if we had electric cars instead of vehicles. And we have all this information now that we can begin to shape and change that system and that dynamic to see how a project can make a positive difference. I would say the one thing that really excites me about landscape architecture is just the layers and good things that sort of layer up in a project or in a work. So we can sequester, we can pull carbon out of the air with our projects. We can make good embodied choices, but also we are providing benefits at a range of scales. So the human individual scale of lowering your blood pressure, having a therapeutic experience, to the more community scale of dealing with stormwater and providing heat island benefits to the larger ecological and global scales. So it's all pretty exciting, and it's exciting to be able to have tools now emerging that we can begin to use to help our clients make informed choices and work.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, that's a great segue into what you have created with the Pathfinder app, because it really has changed the game for not only myself and SMRT, but Berkshire and Rachel are actively using that application, and it's really been a game changer. So I don't know if you'd be willing to kind of take us through sort of how that became a thing. What was your inspiration and passion behind taking on such a challenging endeavor, such as creating that app? Because it's loaded, and it's not only is it informative, but it's intuitive. And I'm not a techie guy, really, and I had no problem navigating that site, at all. So kudos to you for making it accessible to non-techie people as well.
Well, thanks, John and Rachel and everyone for having me and just hosting this conversation. As you all know, it's a really important one. And, I think I'll just echo a little bit when Rachel was talking about kind of what's driving her. I think for me, personally, I'm a farm girl from Missouri. I grew up playing in the creeks and in the field, and the natural environment was my backyard. And so naturally, as a landscape architect, I have this sense of stewardship and kind of starting to understand the effects that we have ahead of us, with the impacts of climate change. And I think probably like many of you, I've always been very sustainably minded in all of our practices in our offices and firms. But, I think that carbon hasn't been a part of the conversation. And, frankly, for me, I work on a lot of large scale kind of resilience projects in the San Francisco Bay Area and big redevelopment projects, and just was starting to question, 5 or 6 years ago, I'm working really hard on figuring out how to adapt this community to sea level rise. But is there more that we can do as landscape architects and professionals in getting involved in this space? And, I frankly thought I was just curious, honestly, about what the carbon impacts of my projects were. And I think, looking back, a lot of people don't kind of question the impacts of everything, maybe outside the buildings, because, sometimes it looks pretty green and we just think, oh, green, it must be good, right? And kind of just writing it off after that point in time. But, it's just really honestly out of curiosity. I wanted to know the carbon impacts of my projects. I thought I could go online that day, and this was just going to be a quick little exercise. I'd get a tool or something and it would tell me that afternoon, and that would kind of be the end of it. But I was really frustrated that, I didn't find that out there. I couldn't believe kind of the lack of tools or guidance or resources that was available for professionals working outside the buildings. And, it was just honestly out of frustration that didn't exist. And I just started pulling resources together. I think the ice inventory from maybe the University of Bath was the first, source that I found, which is,
Right.
not even in this country. I was like, well, this is a good starting point. And okay, the US Forest Service has some information over here. And because I really needed to pull together this whole all these pieces of this puzzle that I couldn't find in other tools or resources. And so I built a very crude spreadsheet with my husband, admittedly, who's really good at Excel. And what we found was it was pretty shocking when you started to put together, the embodied carbon in the materials, understanding the operational emissions that also come from landscapes like fertilizers and all the gas powered equipment that we're using to maintain these places. But then, really just interesting about understanding the carbon sequestration potential, right? And that finding, kind of frankly being surprised by the impact that I was seeing, that honestly most of my projects would take a very long time for them to offset their own carbon footprint. Some projects like half-acre plazas would take like 200 years for them to offset their own carbon footprint. And, it was just really eye-opening and kind of embarrassing. And at that, I started kind of just trying to talk to people about this, and applied for the Landscape Architecture Foundation Fellowship, and was awarded that in 2018, 2019. And so that helped me take kind of this initial idea of finding this gap, and then being able to turn that kind of basic resource into something that could be accessible and free for everybody to use. Because I realized that even if I just change the impact of my projects or my firm's projects, it's not really going to have that big of a difference. But actually, if we got all 75,000 landscape architects in the world to change our business as usual from probably being net emitters, that we could indeed really draw down a significant amount of carbon and contribute to the overall Paris Agreement goals. And so that's really what I'm trying to help us accomplish. And it's I'm like John said, I have no tech background. I had no idea what I was doing when I got into that side of it. I've learned more than I want to know, but sometimes that's just what we need to make change. It's not always easy. So
for sure. I mean, but that's a really inspiring story. You see a gap and you filled it. And I'm not sure. I mean, we can ask everyone here. I mean, I don't know the percentage of people that are using your app, but we use it, at SMRT daily. It's definitely part of our workflow in the site department. So it's good stuff. So let's just move on to the tracking and calculating. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there, right? And it almost can be too much out there. I've found that obviously the Climate Positive Pathfinder app for landscape architects and civil engineers is the gold standard right now. SMRT, we do use a few other databases throughout the phases of the project. We use Pathfinder during SD, at the end of SD and at the end of DD. And at the end of both of those, we're analyzing and making conscious decisions about how we can reduce the carbon. So the fact that the app also has that whole suggestions section at the end is definitely really helpful. Cove Tools, another great product. They are slowly starting to roll out more landscape and civil components to their app. We found that our architects use it quite a lot for energy modeling. It's been a real help there. Because I know this is an embodied carbon discussion, but sustainability as a whole, we've got to be thinking not only about embodied carbon, but also about the actual energy modeling. So for us, it's really, siting buildings and that sort of stuff where we can make the biggest difference. But I guess, Rachel, because you're also using Pathfinder. I mean, are there any things that you think are working as well as Pathfinder, but are there also other things that we can be doing from a tools and a tracking perspective to sort of, I want to say, sort of get up to the level that the architects and engineers are, because they seem to have way more options than we do. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on other ways to sort of up our tracking and calculating game.
I think two things. One, it's interesting how starting to use the tool, how some of those priorities become internalized. And so now, without having to go to the tool, I can talk with a client and say, hey, I see that you want a lawn area. Do you really want lawn? What would you be willing to consider meadow? Or if not meadow, if it's too fuzzy, would a no-mow mix work? And to be able to say that could be, that could be up to 16 times your carbon sequestration rate just by making that decision there. And as Pamela was saying, the biggest thing that just my mouth drops is the maintenance. Maintenance is never anything anyone really likes to talk about at the front of a project, or I see a few people do because everybody's focused on the bright, shiny object that's coming towards them. But maintaining it is the bigger effort. And I was shocked when I saw how much carbon these landscapes were. If you have to mow and you're using gas equipment, how much more, even if you substitute out an electric mower, you could reduce your carbon emissions by 9 times. So those types of nuances that I'm able just to talk to generally with clients about early on in the process have been really helpful. And then other tools, we haven't really been using other tools other than the Pathfinder tool in our firm. We have done a lot of net zero buildings with the Living Building Challenge, and are familiar with the process of doing ground source truthing, where if we can't find information, we call the manufacturer, we call the source of the product to find out the information we need and let them know, almost sell that way of thinking to them, as this is going to be a marketing tool for you in the future. This is something people are going to be coming and asking for. And we're not going to be the first people asking. Let's work together to try and find that information. So there are products and things that we're still hoping to find more information out and more nuanced information on that will continue to feed the process.
Yeah, nice. I mean, Pamela, what do you think? I mean, if there are other things that we can learn from other disciplines. I mean, we're landscape architects, we're using AutoCAD, right? Everyone else is on, Revit. I mean, do we need to be shifting to Revit? Do we need to be shifting to a BIM sort of situation in order to more accurately track and calculate this stuff? I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that's the future, right? If you can have kind of a one-stop shop in terms of your, the tool that you're using, if you're doing your documentation, that could also be doing your tracking. I think that would be kind of where this goes, maybe in a perfect world eventually, but, we're not all there yet. And that was a kind of decision point for me in terms of how I wanted to make the tool, is that by making it, I had a group of fellows that were part of the fellowship when I was in it with LAF, and I asked them, I said, well, what's it going to take for you to change the way you practice or think about this? And they said, one, it would need to be easy and fast, and 2, it need to kind of work into my workflow with the information that I had, and then 3, I would need to get some sort of feedback to know that the changes that I'm making are making a difference. And so that kind of like instant feedback and giving you a score. And so I took that, pretty literally in developing the tool itself, that it's like, if you make it easy for people to do, if you have a question, you can pull up your phone and you can answer that question or out to lunch with somebody. I think that was kind of the first step for us, is to make this easily understandable and accessible, right? So I think probably many tools have that kind of evolution and getting up to somewhere of more sophistication in terms of BIM. So eventually, I think that's a good future pathway. But I do think that there's plenty to learn from actually the architect industry in terms of, I wasn't very aware of architects' tools before I actually made the app. But I have found, since then, like Tally is a really great building embodied carbon tool that also incorporates 3D modeling. And actually Athena is where the the primary data source for the embodied carbon in the Pathfinder. So just wanted to mention that. But also, building transparency in the EC3 tool is a really great, library of, oh no, I'm sort of like, oh, it's been a long day. Rachel.
EPDs.
Thank you, EPDs. I was gonna say it EC3 and I was like, no, EPDs. And so that's, that's such a huge resource. And I feel like actually, starting to work with the Carbon Leadership Forum and trying to sync up these resources. And so, having a way, maybe the tools that start speaking to each other. So, in the Pathfinder, we could be linking like directly, okay, looking for an EPD, go to the EC3 tool, to find it. And so I think in some ways, before we like fully launch into like the BIM, situation is thinking smartly about how we can link these tools together and kind of having them feed off of each other, because there is a feature in the Pathfinder right now, like if there's something missing you're not seeing in here, if you can get the EPD and you can just plug that information directly in without having, or me having to provide that database, because it already exists, which is awesome.
We'll just email you directly, right? And you can just type it in. So
Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, I think that all of these tools are, they have their positives. They do have their drawbacks. I didn't know that. I thought the EC3 tool was still in beta testing mode, and I don't know if that's true or not. If anyone knows. But,
it's definitely available. I've
Yeah.
been on, you can definitely go on and find there's a lot of EPDs on there. So it may be still in a beta mode, but but you can utilize it. It's pretty fantastic.
So John, you have a question, I think, from Ian, who was looking for maybe a little bit more about Landscape 101. He's an architect and he's kind of, would like to be able to talk to his landscape architects about maybe strategies. And I'm wondering, I don't want to speak for him. Ian, do you want to come off of mute and have this conversation with
welcome,
the
Ian.
panelists?
Come on in, Ian.
Or maybe he doesn't want to come in.
No.
But anyway, is that something you three can speak to in terms of, just if you are an architect and you're not working directly on the elements on the exterior of your building, what are you looking for? What are you asking from your landscape architect? Is it the concrete mix design? What is it?
The low-hanging fruit, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, there's three real contributors. It's steel, concrete, and aluminum that we're trying to reduce ultimately those three materials on our sites if we can. So, and it's not just concrete, right? It's the cementitious material, which is the ugly stuff. So yeah, reducing, hardscape in general is going to be your best bet. Increasing plantings and then limiting the amount of soil and earthwork disturbance that you can possibly do. I mean, those are simple and, well, not always simple, depending on the site, depending on the project, the market sector. So nothing simple, but those are kind of three of the ones that you can make a pretty big difference relatively easily, if that makes sense. Rachel, what do you think?
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. I mean, that's the best for us. That's been the best use of the tool is looking at the amount of impervious surface to softscape. And if you can, we have lots of options as designers of how to configure and arrange and get all the program to fit and everything and create great spaces. And a lot of it's optional, whether it's hardscape or softscape. So it can really inform that decision. And in projects where budgets are tight and landscape and civil can often be kind of value engineered out where possible to protect the investment of the building. The first thing to go often is sort of that mid-story, mid-height vegetation, shrubs and grasses, taller grasses, because they're not seen as essential by some clients and by some architects, but they actually provide a lot of habitat and create a sense of enclosure for people. And what's interesting with this tool is that it shows that that's preferred from a carbon standpoint above lawn in most cases. So it kind of shifts the playing field for planting choices and selections.
Yeah, those are really good points, and I can kind of build on them. And also there was a question that came into the chat about, whether as landscape architects we're using the civil specs for the concrete, or if we have our own specs. And I'm sure that probably varies from firm to firm. We do, typically provide our own specs, but we're usually working with our structural engineers to advise on the amount of cement substitutions that we can include. And so just wanted to flag that, because I think as John was talking about, that, concrete, the cement can be one of our kind of biggest offenders. And, we're seeing that we have about like 3,000 projects logged into the Pathfinder kind of from the first year or so. And, about 70% of our emissions are coming from the embodied carbon and the materials in our projects. So it is kind of, paralleling that with architecture. But I won't discount, to John's other point, about the operational emissions as well. I think, the things you don't see in your specs, that we can advise on, long-term, operations and maintenance in our manuals that we provide at times, and, suggesting, electric equipment. I've been shocked recently to learn that, the California Air Quality Resources Board was predicting that in the year, by the year 2020, that emissions from landscape maintenance equipment could actually exceed that of automobiles in 2020. I didn't find the follow-up on it if it actually happened or not, but that's kind of like the extreme we're talking about. It's just something that is happening in the background. You hear the buzz of the mower or blower, and we've been paying a lot of attention on getting improving automobile emissions, but we're not looking very closely at where the other sources of fossil fuels are being utilized. So yeah, just those little hidden things that can add up.
Totally. And I know for SMRT, we are, we're on a mission to modify our concrete specs. And we've been reaching out to local concrete plants and just trying to figure out if they'll even make these mixes. And we've been pleasantly surprised. And I'm talking to you actually right now from Maine, that even up here, they're perfectly happy to make those mixes, those low carbon concrete mixes. So pretty much all it is substituting all the cement, not all the cement, but maybe 30 to 50% of the cement with ground furnace blast slag. So it's equally as durable. It's, it has the same erosion and I'm trying to, I'm forgetting the word right now, but it's equally as strong and durable and can easily stand the test of time. It's actually preferred even on bridges due to its corrosive abilities to prevent corrosion. That bridge design in concretes typically has a lot of ground furnace blast slag. So it's sort of little things like that, but we're actively trying to make sure that our specs are changed to offer low carbon concrete. And I mean, let's be honest, nothing's really going to change unless we start changing and we start asking these manufacturers to change the way they do business. So the more that people demand and ask for low carbon concrete, the more these plants are going to have to change how they operate. And it does come from us. So our specs have to change, our details have to change. But it's a big offender. Concrete's a big offender, and that's certainly something that we can do something about. We don't often deal with a lot of steel as landscape architects and civil engineers, but concrete and hardscape for sure. We can do stuff. So challenges. Let's talk a little bit about challenges, because this is wide ranging and depends on in what kind of market sector you work. It depends what type of project, who your client is. Everything is sort of up in the air when it comes to this. So for me, the biggest one is really just trying to educate owners and clients on what embodied carbon is, because it's always been about upfront. I mean, it's always been about operational carbon. It's always been about what is the utility bill, and that's it, right? Where's my building cost now? What is it going to cost now, and what is it going to cost in 10 years? I want the same utility bills. I want consistency. I want, they want to know the numbers. And the problem is, it's like we don't have a lot of baseline metrics for embodied carbon yet. I'm just, at least I can't find them. So I think that we need to basically bring that awareness to our clients and to our owners that upfront carbon is just as crucial to the operational carbon. That's the biggest challenge, I think, for me, just personally. Obviously, other stuff like if you're doing a P3 project and the developer, return on investment isn't there because it's all bottom line decision. And then maybe, you can't get locally sourced products that are more sustainable. This is definitely true. I know for, in the architecture world, CLT, I mean, it comes from like 2 plants, one's in Canada and one's in Wyoming. So, the fact that there's not a CLT plant in Maine is crazy. We got enough trees up here to easily maintain a CLT plant. But I am seeing stuff like concrete where you can actually get the low carbon concrete. So I know I listed on this PowerPoint slide as a challenge, but for me, I'm starting to see that dial change. Pamela, Rachel, what are your challenges? What do you think is the biggest obstacle to us as an industry in helping to strategically reduce carbon? Is it an education thing, or is it more of a products and materials thing?
The first, yeah.
Sure. I think it's an education thing, and I guess coming from my experience now is that I now start talking to clients about this and in the interview process, or in our first meetings, and most of the time clients are really supportive and interested and want to get involved. And I think that the only reason that didn't happen in the past is because they weren't educated about it and we weren't advocating for it, right? So I think that is just getting the message out there and talking to people about it. I think most people are really concerned about climate change, and even developers, they understand that their impact is pretty significant. I also think that, and sorry, maybe I'm not talking about challenges as much, maybe about overcoming challenges, is the costs thing. And just keeping that conversation simple about, look, 1 square foot of paving costs a whole heck of a lot more than 1 square foot planting. Yes, so there's a cost savings upfront on that. Yes, it requires some maintenance and some water, but those things also bring a lot of other co-benefits, right? And so I think just having the conversation about cost, usually I think when you, like as Rachel was talking about, just trying to get a higher percentage of planting and a lower percentage of paving is going to overall reduce the project cost, which is usually pretty appealing for clients. So I'll leave it at that and let Rachel talk a little bit more.
I'll tag along with the discussion. I agree with everything, and I would also say that building relationships with contractors that are really strong, I think, are very important for this innovation to get assimilated. We can have the best spec in the world and the best ironclad drawings, but the people who are actually out there in the field, on the ground, in the heat, blood, sweat, and tears, making it, building it, they're the ones who are the final chance for it to be implemented right or implemented wrong, substituted out. So as much as we can educate those who are building these environments with us, and get them comfortable with the new technology, the new material, a lot of construction is about managing risk. The AIA structure that we all follow is about managing risk for clients, for professionals, and for the contractors. So as much as we can get folks informed, educated, get information out there, I think even partnerships with testing agencies and partnerships with technology centers and higher ed institutions where case studies can be used. I know with, for example, porous paving was groundbreaking at the time, and I can't tell you how many times I've pointed a client to the University of New Hampshire's research on it and their case studies and other case studies that are nearby that I can point them to and say, hey, I know you're nervous about it. You can drive by this installation over here. Oh, and here's a video of it in the rain, and it makes people more comfortable with making that change. So when the stakes are high, having more information can really help people collectively feel more comfortable with innovating. So I'd really encourage that other piece being connected.
Yeah, absolutely. The UNH Stormwater Center is a thing of beauty. What they do up there, it's fantastic. Our civil engineers go up there pretty much every year for their training and their seminars. So yeah, if you're not aware of UNH Stormwater Center, certainly get online and look that up. So I'm just looking in the chat here. There's a question from Catherine Paplin. What about methane release when you disturb the soil? Yeah, so soil disturbance is a big topic. Oftentimes, as you head out to construction sites, they'll just start ripping up the earth as quick as they can. They want to strip the topsoil. They want to get it out. They want to get big trucks in as quick as they can. Excavation done, and yet the amount of carbon that's released from disturbing soil is shocking. So this is a tough one. I don't really know how to handle it other than to have clear and concise construction documents that properly delineate limits of work. A lot of our, the projects are essentially means and methods as soon as the contracts are signed, but we have the ability to dictate parameters on the site. So we know that soil is going to be disturbed, but we can certainly do better as an industry, I feel, in limiting the amount of disturbance that happens, because you're right, Catherine. I mean, the amount of carbon that is released is high. There's things we can do after construction or during construction to remediate and basically bring some of that life back into the soil. Mycorrhizae and different sorts of bacteria that can be brought in and utilized with disturbed soils. Compaction is a huge issue. Decompaction after projects have taken place and have been constructed before the planting goes in. These are things that we can require in our construction documents. So, yep, soil disturbance, huge problem in our industry, and one that I think we need to tighten up our belts a little bit and make sure that our documents are a bit clear. So, it all depends on the scale of the project, right? So if you're doing a little 1 acre park, I mean, it's not that 1 acre park is small, but if you're doing a small park compared to a huge educational athletic complex, there's going to be a lot more. The differences are going to be pretty extreme. So.
I also wanted to add the option of using cover crops in the interim. So if you're, as we know, when the soil is disturbed, it's exposed to air, the organic matter dies and carbon's released. And, so you can use, if you have to disturb a site, and it's going to be, barren for a long time, you can use cover crops that will help keep more of the carbon in the soil and increase the quality of the soil. So that's just one option to look into. Things like legumes can work. But again, as John said, it was about talking to your client about that and incorporating in your drawings.
Another question here are major paving manufacturers. This is from Henry Moss, thank you. Hanover, Ideal Pavers, Stepstone, working to lower the embodied carbon in their products? Henry, I don't know. I sure hope so, but I don't know the answer to that. Typically, they're going for longevity, is their bottom line with most of their materials. So I don't know, but I think most of these manufacturers they're getting the hint that they're going to need to start changing, or they probably will not end up in the project specs. So.
And I think that's a huge opportunity for us as designers. I think it's the same way that when LEED came around and there were credits out there that said, oh, I need this percentage of recycled content, right? What started happening is everybody got on the phone and started calling Stepstone and whoever it was and said, hey, does your product have this percentage of recycled content? Can I get the sheet that says that? And what that did was it changed the industry, right? Everybody started using more recycled content because I need to provide this sheet and check this box to get my credit, right? So we have the same opportunity here for asking manufacturers for environmental product declarations. It's not the same way that it is a gap right now, I would say, in terms of going to a furnishing company, for example. But if we start asking for the environmental product declarations, it will become more appealing to them because they realize they're going to get your business if you get it. And the more EPDs we can have, the more we can be plugging into these tools and refining our carbon analysis. So I'd encourage everybody to start asking for those things, and that we'll see change eventually.
And I did put in the chat some links to Building Transparency, where they already have a template for an EPD ask letter. They also have template documents like bid request documents that are specific to different product types. So I don't know how many of those product types fall within the umbrella of landscape, but certainly for insulation and other interior products are there, and you could use that very same language for whatever product you're interested in obtaining preferential material information on to sort of guide that discussion.
Christopher asked a somewhat similar question. Have we looked into weescapes from a permacultural perspective? This can drastically increase biodiversity and sequestration. Yeah, 100% agree with that. I don't have a whole
John,
lot to add.
I have a question, because I know that there are a number of like the structural engineers have the structural engineers 2050 letter. And there are a number of sort of subsets of the building community that have formed these sort of advocacy letters, sign-on letters. Does the landscape community have something similar?
Pamela, you want to take that one?
Yeah, and it's because it's hot off the press, so it's not known really at this point in time publicly. But so we have been working with the primary leading organizations for landscape architects around the world. So the American Society of Landscape Architects, the Canadians, Australians, the European Landscape Institute, the International Federations of Landscape Architects, Landscape Architecture Foundation. I think there's about six or so organizations. So we have been working over the past 6 and 8 months to write a declaration to go to support Architecture 2030 and going to the Conference of the Parties, COP26 in Glasgow this year, which is the conference, the UN Climate Change Conference, essentially setting, this is our declaration, this is what we're committing to, this is how it's going to help us meet the Paris Agreement. And so we're getting there, but that's it's a challenge to pull everyone together and get everybody aligned across the country or globe.
Yeah, I think like a lot of the letters, they start with sort of the basics and then it builds momentum. So you have the initial signatories and it just keeps growing and going. And at the very least, we can all agree that transparency is really important. We can't do better work if the manufacturer doesn't know what's in something, or we don't know what's in something relative to embodied carbon. And so.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to do. we've got to speed it up a little if we can. But really, look at your project specifications. You know, if you are specifying steel products, you know, things that you can do to hit the low-hanging fruit. You know, specify steel from electric arc furnaces whenever you can, because they can accept recycled steel. They're really efficient and they're very flexible. Again, we're going to hammer home the EPDs from material and product manufacturers. I know our interiors department demands them on all new products coming in. They're basically redoing their whole interiors library to basically ensure that everything for every product has a sustainable option within their line, right? So and again, we get back to limiting soil disturbance, reconditioning soils. There's a lot we can do. I think there's a lot more we can do, and I think it's truly a team effort. You know, it's not one firm against one firm here. As Pamela stated earlier, the creation of the Pathfinder app has opened up, you know, so many opportunities for landscape architects and civil engineers to be able to track and calculate carbon and you know, and develop options and quantify options that make the best choice for their clients and for your clients. So I urge you to get involved with the Pathfinder app if you have not already. I urge you to look at your specs and just see what little things you can do to make a difference. You know, I think this discussion can certainly go for a while. I know I want to respect everyone's time. I want to thank Rachel and Pamela for all their efforts and time that they've spent responding to my emails over the past few weeks. But it's been fun to meet both of you and everyone who participated and contributed in the chat. Really appreciate it. Definitely keep in touch. There's contact information here on one of my slides. Yep, there you go. That's Tech Whiz. So certainly you can, if you do have questions, you can send them my way and I'll get answers to you. But these are some great resources if you're not already aware of them. The ASLA has a great resource guide, the Sustainable Sites Initiative, which we didn't have time to talk about really today. Great program. We need more people to become sites certified. It's, you know, it's our new lead. Let's just put it that way for landscape architects. And then again, Pamela's Climate Positive Design website. Please check that out and get involved. So thank you guys. I know we've got a few minutes left, but I want to throw it back over to Julie with CLF. And thank you guys so much for all your time today, and talk soon.
Super, John, thanks so much. Thanks again to Rachel, Pamela, and everyone for asking questions to keep the conversation going. I hope you can see my screen. Somebody shout if you can't. John, I took the liberty of attempting to take a few notes and writing down some ideas around what next steps might look like. Definitely some repeats from what you have in your slides, but you know, questions around things like policy for native landscape to attack the lawn issue, policies to achieve a certain score using the Pathfinder tool for landscape architects, demand EPDs, which we had a conversation about, developing a list of precedents for clients to visit, like the UNH Stormwater Center that you mentioned, et cetera. So I think these are things that we'd love to have more conversation around at the CLF Hub. So please do join if you're interested so we can continue to work on what these action items might look like as a cohesive collective effort. To reiterate, lots of events going on in June. This is the second of 7. If you know folks who would be interested in the other impact series, please do let them know. Embodied carbon in interiors, highly controlled spaces, healthcare, science and tech, commercial and multifamily, public bid process, which should be very interesting, and then a more single family, small scale residential conversation to close us out. With that, we'll end 5 minutes so that everybody's got time before your next thing, because calendars are packed these days. Thanks again for your time. Please feel free to hang out for a couple minutes and put questions in the chat if you'd like. Otherwise, we'll see you all soon. Thanks again.
Thanks, Julie.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Pamela.
Thank you, everyone.
I did just let everyone know that the chat will be sent out in an email along with the link to this program today. So for those of you who want to access some of those resources, they'll be shared in that manner along with the presentation and the recording. So you can revisit it, edit, share it again.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for all your help, Lisa. You're tremendous.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you, Lisa. Couldn't have done it without you.
Easy when we have participants. It's nice to see some of those same faces. I'm glad folks are participating in a couple of these. That's really great.
I agree. It's also nice to see in the chat, somebody, Eric said, you know, could a metric be adapted as a goal? Could Pathfinder be an option? It's nice to see that, you know, folks are thinking about the same types of strategies and next steps to start to ingrain this more.
Oh, right. And the certifications, like the use of that tool specific to the landscape credits.
Yep. Drawdown by Paul Hawken is awesome. Completely agree. There's so many good things in here. So thank you for saving the chat and sharing.
I wanted
make sure.
I wanted to shout out at the end, but I saw that we were wrapping up, but
Yeah.
Oh,
It is a
no.
great book.
it's so informative. Oh my goodness. Like,
Yeah.
and so landscape, you know, I took Pamela's research numbers, 1 gigaton landscapes globally could potentially draw down by 2050. That puts us on the map of number 70 as a solution to climate change. So
Nice.
it's really exciting. But then if you look at all the things on the
Related
right,
ones.
yeah, well, I think I counted the first 20. There were like maybe 12 that were landscape related or somehow related. So even we have such potential to make such a big impact. But this is informative to be like, is solar really a good option? And am I doing a good thing? The current list, I think, is if we go with a more plant-based diet, not going totally vegetarian, but more plant-based.
Yeah.
I think 8 gigatons we could globally pull down. And I'll just say one last thing. You know, cumulative math is fun to think about sometimes. So brushing your teeth, example of like brushing your teeth, right? Like it's maybe 4 minutes a day. If you're doing a good job, your dentist is proud. In a lifetime, that number turns out to be like 79 days of your life that you've brushed your teeth. And then you can multiply that times 7.9 billion, is it billion people in the world? Yeah, that's a good, you know, that's a lot of time spent globally brushing teeth. So every little thing we do actually does add up if you think about time and numbers of people. So.
Which is why we have to worry about what we're using for a toothbrush.
Exactly. And toothpaste.
And toothpaste and everything else. It's never ending. Is there anybody else that's hanging on here that like is hanging on because you had this question that you just couldn't pose in the chat and you want to ask it? I'm just
Ask it. Come on.
Or just, you know, enjoying a nice way to end the day before maybe a long weekend. I hope some folks are taking advantage of summer Fridays.
Oh, I wish.
We do half day Fridays.
Yeah, same.
So, yeah, it's pretty nice.
It's good. All right, well, we should close it down. Thanks everybody again.
All right, you guys are awesome. Thank you very much for your participation, for listening and for contributing. And yeah, be well, stay safe. Talk soon.
Thanks everyone.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Yep.